Hi to everyone that's joined. We'll just give a couple of minutes to let some more people join us, and then we'll get started. We'll just give it a couple more minutes and then we'll get going. All right, I think we'll get started and we'll just let the late joiners catch up. So thank you everyone for joining us today, whether you've logged on from sunny Dubai, where it's winter at the moment, or elsewhere. We're really grateful that you've taken the time out of your day to be with us today. Today's as special as it is important. It's special because it's the second event we're running under the Marbouta initiative, a movement that we launched during Women's Day earlier this year with the purpose of advancing women and creating clearer pathways for progression in the communications industry. It's also another important moment because we launched the Saraha series, which is the first of Marbouta's events today, of a series that aims to encourage and host very frank and crucial conversations about how we can address the issues surrounding female representation in our industry and how we can address these issues through real, tangible action. Now, the Saraha series forms part of our Marbouta in overall initiative alongside the Women to Women mentorship program, which currently has 24 active mentee-mentor pairings who are halfway, or actually over halfway, should I say, through their one-year program. Soon we'll be opening up applications for a second cohort at the start of 2022. So anyone who would like to mentor or anyone who would like to be mentored who is in a junior role, sort of starting out their careers or in a mid-level position, then we really encourage you to join us. You can do so on the PRCA website. It'll be on one of the slides, so please do note that down. Today is important because the conversation around women's advancement is not just reserved for International Women's Day. And despite the progress we've made, which we're all really proud of and we have a long way, women continue to face equality and inclusion challenges in the media, in communications and creative industries. both in terms of our participation in the sector and how we're represented in the sector. And our session today looks to do just that. So we're honored to be hosting this event alongside Arab International Women's Forum. To kick us off, we have a very special message from the chair of AIWF, Dr. Afnan.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, it gives me great pleasure as chairman of the Arab International Women's Forum to welcome you to our unique event today, Women in the Media. Today's event is presented jointly by AIWF and Marbouta, an empowerment movement that introduced the first mentorship program in the MENA region for women in PR. This is the first in the Saraha series, a three-part initiative designed to explore challenges and opportunities for senior leadership, diversity, and inclusion in the MENA, communications, PR, and creative industries. Our partnership in this event takes place as part of AIWF 20th anniversary program in 2021, celebrating 2 decades as a leading development organization for economic inclusion of women in the MENA region. Over the years, we have seen extraordinary advancements of women in the region, on boards and in business, entrepreneurship, and finance to innovation, STEM, and even space. Yet we all clearly see that the inclusion of women in the media and communication sector has been largely overlooked until now. This is not a challenge unique to the MENA region. There's a universal gender gap in the industry that must be addressed. For example, women make up 2/3 of the workforce in the public relations industry, yet more than half of all senior position and management roles in the industry go to men. Across 114 countries, women represent just 24% of the people we see, read about, and hear from in the media. Lack of newsroom diversity, creative diversity, production diversity, and employment diversity limits the advancement of women's perspectives, ideas, and voices. AIWF has a resolute focus on developing and nurturing opportunities for women's advancement and leadership in all sectors and spheres. And we believe that now is the time to shine a light on women's inclusion in the media, the challenges they face, and the remarkable opportunities that the digital economy has to offer. Allow me to express my deep appreciation to our partners at Mimic Ogilvy, the founding partner of the Marbouta initiative, and to PRCA and the GWPR for all their valued cooperation and partnership for today's event. I thank you all for joining us, and I wish you a highly and productive and engaging session today. Thank you very much.
Thank you to Dr. Afnan and the whole team at the Arab International Women's Forum for partnering with us for this event. Now, for the reason we're all here, and not to mention that we had the first little technical glitch of the presentation. Excuse the random black box that appeared not next to Dr. Afnan. I think we're all still trying to figure out this Zoom webinar thing. As I said, now for the reason we're all here, we have 3 excellently diverse sessions lined up with participations from really, really fantastic speakers from across the communications and creative industries field. They bring with them knowledge, experience, insight, and they're here today to have, as we've mentioned, very honest and frank conversations with us. So for our first discussion, we have the trend-setting brand of the year. Gen Z are masters in it. Myself, I'm still figuring it out, but you know, I'm sure we all can't deny we don't know who TikTok is. So welcome to the discussion with TikTok. I'd like to introduce and welcome our wonderful guests from TikTok. We have Kinda Al-Issa, who is Head of Content Solutions, and Annie, who is the Platform Strategy Lead. I'm going to hand over the session to my colleague Joe, who's going to be discussing all things TikTok and communications with the ladies. So over to you.
Yes, hello, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. Thank you, Cassandra, who is probably, as you can tell from my background, sat here to my left. So we're playing a bit of a technical juggling with mics and cameras and whatnot. It's a real pleasure to be here, and thanks to everyone, again, who's made this possible. We started the platform in order to be able to host sessions like this, and it's so important to continue to mention that everybody that works on Marbouta, everybody that speaks, joins our events, collaborates, and works is doing this out of the passion for the mission and nothing else. This is 100% pro bono, and all the partners are giving up their time and energy and work for free. And it's not just a speaking event like this, it's programs, there's mandates, there's all sorts of things, even down to the people who produce our pins, which you can obviously have if you request as well. It's doubly special for me because I get to work with the team on such an initiative, but I'm also a huge fan of the initiative. We understand the challenge that we have in the communication sector. 9 times out of 10, we usually trying to address these kind of issues through clients or client work, but we understand today that we need to obviously take advantage of the position and platform that we have and take that accountability and responsibility. So it's a pleasure to be part of this as well. It's an honor to host 2 women from TikTok. It's, as you said, you're kind of rarely out of the news. It's sort of the number one thing on everyone's kind of digital and social agenda at the moment. And of course, you're constantly in touch with culture across the board as well. My job here today is to ask the questions that will be hopefully on the lips of the audiences. So I will dive in without further ado with my first question, which is to you both. What do you really think of Mark Zuckerberg? No, I'm joking. That's not my first question. It's a pleasure to have you. I want to give you both 10, 20 seconds to introduce yourselves. Please tell the audience, what you're about, and then we'll get cracking.
Thanks, Joe. I'm gonna start, Kinda. So I'm Annie. I'm head of platform strategy here at TikTok. I come from a background of FMCG. I used to be in Procter & Gamble for over a decade. And I'm very happy to be on this rocket ship, which is TikTok. On a personal level, I have 2 daughters, Ella and Cardi, and ever since I joined TikTok, I suddenly became cool in their eyes, so I'm very grateful for that. Kinda, on to you.
And I'm Kinda. I don't have 2 daughters. I am a child at heart still. And that's what makes me excited about working at TikTok. Before TikTok, I've worked in media agencies for the majority of my career. And yeah, I'm excited about shaping culture over here on this rocket ship.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much. I have 2 female cats, and half the time they show no interest in me. So maybe I'll apply to TikTok, and before I know it, they'll be a little bit more affectionate. Both of you have obviously been through some major companies. You mentioned Procter & Gamble. You've been in the industry. You are you're seasoned professionals. So outside of TikTok, let's start with your personal perspective or professional perspective on the sort of journey we've been on in terms of our progress towards representation of women, particularly over the last sort of 10 and 15 years, particularly in that social frame, which would have probably, I assume, engulfed the majority of our careers. So, I mean, Annie, I'll start with you. What's your perspective on the progress we've seen in terms of female representation? Where are we today?
Media is usually, it's usually a reflection of cultural realities, right? And let's be honest, we're a long way from being fully represented across media or everywhere else. So if today I ask the audience to close their eyes, if I tell you close your eyes, imagine a CEO, imagine a president, a director, whatever you want. Typically responses from the audience come back as it's a male character, and then they kind of describe it. Because even embedded in us through all the socialization we've been through over the years, we do associate these roles. We're still not there yet culturally, and that is still not reflecting fully in media. It's a bit of a chicken and egg if you think about it, because it takes time for cultural realities to come into place and then to be reflected on media. But at the same time, media accelerates, the cultural reality. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg. However, this being said, we do see that there has been progress. So in my opinion, I have seen, even in my lifetime, I have seen progress in terms of what is seen on TV, what is seen TV digital space, in terms of film, in terms of ads. Women used to be portrayed as homemakers, as caretakers, you know, dependent on men or object of men's attention. But now women are taking on a bit more central role, a bit more independent. I by no means am I saying we're fully there yet, but I try to think of a few positive examples. Always like a girl, Dove campaign for real beauty, if we talk about ads, Barbie reshaping itself under Imagine the Possibilities, Ariel Share the Load. I mean, there are examples. It's still disappointing that I have to share examples. It should be the norm. It shouldn't be anything different anymore. But I would say, all in all, female representation in the media has seen progress over the last 50 years, let's say.
Kinder.
Yeah, I think I tend to agree with Annie. There is progress. Now we can debate how slow or how fast or how this progress should look like. I think there was a study that said that across, I think, more than 100 countries, the people we read about, we see, or we hear on all kinds of representation of media, right, from TV, television, newspapers, digital space, comprise probably around 25% of everybody that we see, which is obviously not a true representation of society at large. So I think media still has a long way to go, but we're also seeing some things shift. And we had a debate internally, I think, within the office of how we feel, for example, about things like, you know, the rumored Bond being a female character, right? Marvel introducing female superheroes because some people feel like it's forced, right? I'm personally not against that entirely. I think there's importance in visibility to create change, to drive that. Like Annie, I think, touched on it, a chicken and egg kind of situation. Media does push the envelope, which is why it needs to be front and center when we're talking about this topic.
100%. And just as a side, if we want to talk about James Bond at length after the show, I'm very happy to do so. And my family is very happy for you to take over the role of listening to. This chicken and egg thing is great. It's a great thought. It's a great concept, because when we look at traditional media, and in some of the conversations we're having today, there'll be a bigger focus on this. One of the critical things that we talk about is that exact balance, which is media, you know, a real reflection of society, or is it really driving society? Traditional media can look within to sort of redefine narratives and redefine stereotypes, because they dictate a lot of the conversation. They dictate the content. They build that content. They have the agenda. They know what they're doing. Okay. TikTok, coming to your business, TikTok is in a different position. You know, you're a platform for content and expression. You're a facilitator of that conversation. So talk us through the difference in that and the role of TikTok today.
So first of all, you're right. Let's start with the platform itself, right? TikTok has a participatory nature, right? Which is very unique, be it through the different types of things that you can see on the platform, right? Be it duets, be it trends, be it hashtag challenges, etc. So it kind of takes what you alluded to, which is kind of this democratization of narrative and messaging in media and creative, to completely different heights, right? That haven't been there before. So touching on, I think you have, for the audience today, what would be more interesting, I think you have marketeers and brand custodians here in the audience. If we look at the evolution of brand campaigns on the platform, it is kind of mimicking that kind of change. So initially, marketers used to, let's say, create ads that people watch, right? Like you're saying, on TV in their living rooms, or they see them in magazines. Then we get to this social age where we created ads that we wanted people to share, right? These really cool kind of narratives, shot really well, and we wanted people to share those. Now what we've seen is given, it's not just credit to TikTok, but this whole democratization of creativity, we've been moving towards, from a user-centric approach to more of a community ownership approach, right? Where users start crafting the story around a brand. So with that, we find that gender gaps are slightly closing if people listen to them. and if marketeers listen to those, we have men, for example, jumping on trends with a female VO, right? Because we've seen that often, because it's the trend that matters, and they kind of do that on their own way. Women jumping on trends with a male VO. And I'll give you an example. So one of our most popular hashtags in Ramadan last year was actually a Starbucks campaign called Love at First Sip. So in it, it is an overly dramatic VO about, you know, that first sip of coffee after a long day of fasting. It performed really well, but it's delivered in a female VO. But there was no problem for anybody, any age, any gender, to jump on that trend, because the relatable message is the same. So I think the distinction between in content is just now what is relevant for people versus it being very gender skewed. And obviously our platform is one that champions diversity and inclusion, right? And provides a voice for these sub communities within overall. It's more interest based. And Annie, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I'd like to build on what you said, Kinda. In fact, you know, the nice thing about platforms, about TikTok in specific, and the power of the community is it's very much, it allows for a lot of authenticity. If you go back a few years, I don't know if you recall, there was this whole campaign of, not campaign, it's just the people talking about social media versus reality, right? You would see people with their workout and they look really horrible and sweaty, which is what we look like when we work out, right? But then you see, you know, on social media, you look great and all glammed up. And this is not reality. And slowly people started not wanting that fake image anymore. And TikTok came in and played very nicely to this. And I feel, you know, it was the overlap of TikTok having that platform and then, you know, the need from people going there. And it started being a space for authenticity. And what happened is that, and this is one of the reasons TikTok was called the last sunny corner on the internet. And it makes you, you know, you go in, you can just be yourself. And just by being yourself already, you are, let's say, in a way, unburdening yourself from all the stereotypes, whether they're gender stereotypes or any other stereotype. But the point for our discussion here, you can kind of be you, regardless in a way of what's expected, because actually the videos that do really well are the ones that are the most authentic, and people go there for that. So you see, it's kind of, to your question, to your point at the beginning, it's the power of the content is in the hands of people and not necessarily, you know, it's with people, but people are craving authenticity, and they are, you know, expressing that. And with that, you're seeing a bit less strict definitions and stereotypes when it comes to gender or anything else.
This is a really interesting area because, you know, I work in an agency. We talk a lot about authenticity and achieving authenticity for businesses. Authenticity isn't a trend, right? You're saying it here. It's something that in time, when we're experiencing or we're going through a sort of a wave, let's talk about, you know, social, particularly in the last sort of 10 years when we look at influencer and you know, and content creators, we get to a point naturally as humans where we naturally crave the authenticity, right? It sort of comes in these waves. So what does, I mean, kind of define this authenticity for me today in the parameters of the stereotype? Because you talk there about, you know, the stereotypes are obviously dictated, you know, I mean, we're talking decades ago, right? All the way back to, you know, the very beginning of advertising, and still to this day in many platforms and in many areas of business and in many areas of the internet. But what you've got is you've got a community or sets of communities, different communities of people who are, you know, getting, I hasten to use the word success because it's not, you know, it depends how you measure that, but getting the positive response that you would hope by projecting themselves as themselves, which is in contrast to many of the stereotypes we know. Is that a fair way to put it?
Yeah, in a way, I think that is not far from the truth. So Kita and I discuss a lot what would be ideal. What would be ideal, regardless of TikTok or just the world? It would be a world with no stereotypes. So unstereotyping the world. So that would be a dream come true, because imagine you don't have any more, because as a human being, it's not just a gender stereotype. There are lots of other stereotypes we fit in. And expectation, you can just be yourself. There's no more, you know, box that you're supposed to be put in. Now, that is an ideal utopia at this point because it's not reality. And we wish it was, but it isn't. Now, let's bring it back to media. And what we see is that media has advanced, as you said, since the start of advertising. It's advanced from one stereotype to a better stereotype, right? We are not necessarily, we're very far from this unstereotyped world. And let's talk about this progression in stereotypes. Today, there was a Duke University article that said that it was talking about women's portrayal in media, and it said it went from the housewife to the superwoman. So yes, there is progress. I'd rather be a superwoman than a housewife. That's my personal, choice. Now, someone else would rather be the opposite, and so on and so forth. So, but today, the depiction of women is that they can play different roles, let's say, and that has evolved. But still, the concept of superwoman comes with a lot of it's a stereotype in itself, and it comes with a lot of expectations. So I'm a working mom, for example. I cannot say, I'm always in the balance of, not being late on something that's work related because of anything that's family related, but at the same time, not neglecting my kids. It's always this struggle. And I'm sure if there are other working moms on the call, I am sure they can, relate to this. It is a stereotype, and it comes with its own expectations and with pressures. So what we love about TikTok, and this is where also we're very fortunate to be in a job that aligns with our principles and our values, and we're very grateful for that. And what we love about TikTok is this whole aspect of authenticity allows you to come in and be yourself regardless, and maybe joke about the stereotype, and maybe joke about, there are mom talks for people who are working. There is any community, you will find something that reflects you. And the nice thing is you can just be yourself and joke about it, and just, kind of regardless of what's considered as right or wrong. And if Kinda and I aspire to this unstereotyped world, definitely TikTok is one step towards there, but definitely not there, so it's just a bit of evolution, let's say.
And Kinder, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
I mean, these conversations, Annie and I, like she said, we do them a lot. I think the more we dissect or disseminate stereotypes is what will lead to an unstereotyped world, because I think as long as we understand that there is not one stereotype, we moved from, like Annie said, something like the woman who is the caregiver to the woman who is a super boss, super mom, etc. But the more we understand that there can be, 10,000 different stereotypes of women, right? If we understand that there is diversity in stereotypes, that's what will lead to an unstereotyped world.
Sure. So it's almost like, stereotypes obviously exist for a reason. What we want to do is we want to transform those stereotypes, right? We want new stereotypes to a degree, positive ones. And I had it's really funny, because just last night I came across an ad. Well, I served an ad for TikTok Business. You've probably seen it, and it really caught my eye. Obviously, obviously know that we're having this discussion today, so I'm probably a bit more aware. But it was TikTok for Business, and it was talking about small startups and entrepreneurs and small businesses. And Annie, right at the beginning of the session, you said if we close our eyes today and we say, CEO, president, etc., there's a vision that we get. There's a predetermined bias that we have that's ancient, that gives us a version of that. But the character that was being used was a woman. It was a woman of color. She wasn't plus size by any means, but she wasn't sort of size zero. Obviously weight and men has rarely been a challenge as it is in the media for women. And she had very colorful nails, and she was quite energetic, and she was talking about business, and she's talking about owning businesses, and what people can do on businesses over the festive season with TikTok for Business. And it just felt like a really good example of what we talked about, because we'd had a conversation yesterday in the build up to this, what we talked about in terms of altering those stereotypes. But there was a critical piece to it, because I know that you mentioned Kinder James Bond. There's a cast diversity that is kind of kind of grips the corporate world first, where we say, okay, diversity is something that you can see, so let's go and diversify visually. But that's not an answer. But what I liked about this was that it goes back to what you first said. This was a real businesswoman. This was a real reflection of culture. It wasn't a sort of determined sort of biased casting of what people believe. People in big corporations believe the face should be of someone that would be an entrepreneur or a business starter who knows about the challenges of business and knows how to handle a boardroom and things like that. It was actually a real person, and that real person looked very different to our predetermined biases are. So it was really refreshing. So I have two questions on that, really, which is, firstly, is this what you mean in terms of example of positively altering those stereotypes? That's the first one. And the second one would be, to what degree, from a personal perspective, do you think regular people pick up on these? They're noticing this exposure and then the positive effect that can have.
So I think I'll start with again, your first one. It's that visual representation is, yes, not the only thing that matters, but it is super important, because for us, we've grown with an unconscious bias, like you've spoken about. The new generation, we're hoping, grows up without this unconscious bias, no matter how aware you are. And the first start to that is visibility. We can't diminish the role of visibility anywhere. So the more we take steps to very consciously make those, let's say, diversity, and I hate using that in this context, create those kinds of opportunities, the better. Now, in terms of what we can do, to be honest, I know there's a lot that has been said about men and their role in this. And it's not to say that they don't have a role, but we always like to look inwards when Annie and I talk about the onus being on women as much as it is on men. Because as much as we believe, for example, when we have conversations, we are progressive women, we're very aware and conscious of either our unconscious bias or the conditioning in society. We still fall prey to that sometimes, right? There's no way for us not to. It's just how our belief system is programmed. So I think the onus starts with us in order to create this unstereotyped world, which I saw there was a question in the chat, which is not really unstereotyped. What we're talking about is diversity of stereotypes that leads to not having one or two or three only. I think there's a big role for women to play here in being, first, very conscious of it, and two, educating ourselves in how to ask and how to create that change in our environments. We're not talking global domination as much as I would like that right yet, but in each, there's a part for each of us to play, and I think it actually starts with women.
Yeah, I fully agree to what Kinda's saying. And historically, people have come together to drive any big change, right? And whether it's women or not women, and whether it's the women's right to vote, whatever it was. And it's really us coming together, relying on each other. There's rarely a conversation I have with a woman, friend, colleague, whoever it is, that doesn't mention being, liberated when she spoke to another woman who was facing the same thing, or that was helped by another woman. And there's this beautiful TED talk by Amber Hikes, and she has this concept where she says, climb and lift while you climb. So she says, there's no use getting to the top of being the first if you're going to be the last, right? It's about climbing that ladder, whatever the ladder is, and then handing it over and enabling another woman to climb, and so that you really create this unstereotyped world, or on the way there, the positively stereotyped world. So it's really about us coming together and lifting each other. And if I want to tie this back to also what you were saying earlier, in TikTok, the existence of communities themselves, the difference between TikTok, not many people know this, but if you think about social networks, they're all about people so if I follow you, I get served content based on what you like. It's based on other people around you. But TikTok, we call it a content graph, where you get served stuff based on what you like. So if you spend more time on a video, about books, then you get served more videos about books. Whereas if you skip through pet related, then you don't get served that. So it's really not a community. It's not a social network in a way. It's a community driven. And because it's a community, you get a chance. You end up in communities that in relation to women kind of have similar points of view and can lift each other up and can discuss it. So there's a bit, like I said, there's a bit of a nice synergy between the concept of a community and our aspirations as women and what we want to achieve in all the discussions we're having today, or Kinda and I have usually in the office. So there's a bit of a synergy here, and there's a bit of a power of the community. And to be honest, if you think about what you are doing with that Marbouta and what you had explained to us and what you introduced the session with, what Cassandra introduced with, it's really a bit of that, right? Mentorship is about lifting while you climb. It's exactly that, right? So I think we've all tapped into how to, and the more we can get, and the more we can have people on that Marbouta and being able to actually take people and lift them, women lifting other women. I think it's really, I cannot think of a better step towards this utopia we're looking for.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you, Annie. This has been spot on. And just to reiterate that point to the audience, I know we've got a few more people on who maybe missed the introduction. One of the key challenges that brought this initiative upon us was the fact that because 2 points, right? Younger women, people who are aspiring to reach certain positions, don't have access to senior experienced mentors who they can truly connect with. And that's a reflection of a problem that we have, which is that we're not getting enough women into senior positions. So it's, again, your chicken and egg situation. So with the Marbouta mentorship program, it's reason we call it open to all is that we work hard to connect aspiring young professionals with senior women outside of their companies, which traditionally companies might be a little bit uncomfortable with. You can work in one company, but you can be mentored with another, because there aren't enough senior women to go around. Okay, there's just a shed bunch of me's around, and that's not good enough. So I really like that point that you make, and that's obviously central to what the initiative is. Important to note for everyone that we also launched the Marbouta mandate, which is a 4-step action-oriented mandate that senior men in the industry can adopt and immediately action to help defeat their biases. Because I think you raised this, Kinda. This isn't, when we say women to women mentorship program, makes it sound like this is a problem for women that women are going to solve, and we know that's not the case. So this has been really eye-opening for me, and thank you so much. I'm learning more about TikTok myself every day. I'm not the savviest, but I'm hoping to get there. Maybe I'll get my cats on there, and we'll see how I do. I want to just give you one more minute, and I want to thank you so much for giving us your time, because I just appreciate how busy everyone is, and your insight is so valuable. Give us 30 seconds each, just summarize your perspectives on the day, and what would you say to younger aspiring women who are coming into this very difficult sector. There's a lot of ego, there's a lot of aggression, it's social, there's always new, and there's a lot of innovation. There's so much going on end to end, from media to communications to social, whatever it else would be. What would you say to young aspiring women today?
Okay, so just to wrap up maybe our call, I'd say we've come a long way, but we have not come a long way by people being silent or by not raising our voice. And obviously there's different ways to do that. We're not going to tackle that. So I think it's important for people to voice out when they see too much of, let's say, non-opportunities or stereotypes being driven, etc. It's important to raise awareness. Sometimes the issue is not so much an intentional bias, but sometimes it is about people just not knowing better. And it's on everybody to drive that educational message forward. And I think that's what I would leave people with, is if you see something, voice it out. You never know what can happen.
Thank you, Kinda.
And building on what Kinda said, I think the only build I would add is women. I would ask each one of us as women to actually, lift while we climb and reach out. Even just sharing an experience in itself make someone else, another woman somewhere feel, oh, wow, I'm not the only one going through this. So that would be my only build. And I'd like to thank you for hosting us also. It's a great initiative you're doing, and you know, we're honored to be part of it.
Thank you so much. I'll hand that backstage to the tens of people doing all the work while I sit on camera. No, thank you so much. Honestly, appreciate it so much, Kinder, Annie. This has been great, and thank you to TikTok as well. You know, there's the monetary value of having both of you on the school at the same time must be high. So I appreciate that very much. I'm going to hand over back to our host, Cassandra, now. Thank you again. And
thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Back to me. Hi, everybody. Thank you, ladies, very much. And gentlemen, Joe. Thank you, ladies and Joe. Yeah, a really great start to the event, a very relevant conversation, and one that will obviously continue to evolve, you know, as we navigate the social media stratosphere, and you know, the more we engage with it, and the more we have young users and Gen Z and millennials engaging and obviously shaping, you know, the content that we see on there. That kind of leads us really nicely onto our second session, which is empowering the next generation of women. Now, this takes it to a little bit from a different perspective. We're looking at the education sector. And what we've prepared today is a frank one-on-one conversation with one of the leading women figures in the region's largest education entity. We've got Tammy Murphy, who is Vice President Chair of the GEMS Education Committee, and she's joined by the notable powerhouse, who is Samar Al-Sharafa, who is the founding CEO of She Is Arab. Now, they're going to be discussing what educators are doing to help empower tomorrow's female leaders, how we're seeing the social dynamic evolve, how educators are approaching gender challenges, and what industries, and you know, kind of looking at our creative commerce industry, the creative economy, what can we learn from undergraduates and youths? So welcome, Samar and Tammy.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cass. It's great to be here with you all today. As one of the early supporters of Marbouta with Joe and Rachel and Cass and everyone, I'm proudly wearing my pin. I think it's a very important topic that we're discussing today, Tammy, and I really appreciate the opportunity to have this chat with you. You work for GEMS, which is a forward-looking educational establishment in the region. And I believe the early years are the most important years in character development. And so as a woman leader, how do you focus on empowering young girls in your schools? We obviously know that this is part of the Education 2030 agenda for equal empowerment of girls and boys. I'd love to hear from you. How do you address these issues with these young girls growing into this world?
Great, thanks. Well, I mean, of course, developmentally, it depends a little bit on the age group. So, when they're starting school at the ages of 4 or 5 in our elementary school years, it's really just always about encouraging these young girls to be themselves, to follow their passions, and to make them realize that you can be anything, that the possibilities are endless. And that's modeled in every action, from the teachers to the custodians to myself as I'm walking through schools. I mean, obviously, as they get a little older and they're teenagers, then, what's so powerful in the schools is that they are ready to learn about these issues, to discuss them deeply, to write about global issues, which happens obviously in all of our schools. There's a lot of schools that have community action and service programs. It's part of the IB program, but it's such a great framework to get students to do something about the problems that they see in their school, in their communities, and in the world. Last year at one of our schools, there was a young woman who approached me. I think she was probably about 14, 15, a 10th grader. And she says, I want an all-female symposium. I only want female judges from the UAE. They're in powerful positions. I want to allow young girls from all over the world to, make a group, have a something they want to promote, something they're considering, maybe selling at some point. And I want these teams to compete, and all these female judges along the way in the months leading up to the competition will serve as mentors to them. And she came with this idea. And, when young people come with these ideas, what the schools need to do is empower them. So we allowed her to do that. And this competition went off last year with, I can't even remember, well over 20 groups of different young females from all over the world, really powerhouse women in the area that judged them. And, it was one of those days where as an educator and as a female, you just had goosebumps about the future looking at these young women.
Absolutely, I can imagine. I mean, this sounds so interesting. And with your, education experience, you have over 37 years of experience in the field of education, I reckon. And I noticed that from your previous experience, you bring so much focus, not just on the academic achievement, but also on character development. And I read something about one of your schools having been one of only 5 schools in the US to be honored with what's called an International Habits of Mind School of Excellence. Could you tell us a little bit more about that, and tell us if there's something similar in the region?
Yes, so that is grounded on the research of Dr. Benna Kalik and Dr. Art Costa, who really looked at dispositions that young people need to thrive in the 21st century and beyond. And as a school, what I thought was so beautiful when we were given that, obviously an incredible distinction, was that it really became part of the ethos, the vocabulary, the way we were as a community. So it was so seamless, right? Because sometimes programs such as that are very kind of like, this month is responsibility and this month is citizenship. But it really was a part of who they were, and not just the children, but every part of the learning community. I'd say there are similar things in this region. As you noted, I have 31 years in the United States and only 5 years here in Dubai, but I can draw some quick analogies to IB learner profile, high performance learning, which you may hear about in some British curriculum schools. And obviously you could draw parallels to those habits of mind or dispositions to many of those same programs. So I see that alive and well in many schools in the UAE, and especially in GEMS.
Absolutely. I mean, I can definitely concur, given that my kids go to a GEM school, and I am familiar with the HPL framework, of course. I also would commend GEMS for establishing the first of its kind entrepreneurship center in the region, which we've collaborated with, actually, as she is Arab, providing speakers, actually female speakers, who were presented as role models in different sectors. And most of the time, these sectors were actually male-dominated sectors. And I think this makes obviously a huge, difference for students to see women as, I don't know, interior decorators or engineers in the oil and gas field, or, and that's important. There's a big, emphasis on the importance of role models in this day and time. I personally experienced it firsthand with my son, whom I took to a doctor once, and and the doctor was female. And after leaving, he said, "So when are we going to go to the real doctor?" And that shocked me. So how important do you think role models are? And if we can connect it somehow to role models in media, because obviously media is currently presenting to us, a select category, let's say, of women on TV, and there aren't so many role models perhaps that we are necessarily being exposed to. So what are your views on those, on role models?
Well, I think modeling is one of the most powerful tools out there, right? We can read things, we, can have one-on-one conversations, but that walk, that talk that you see consistently really helps to frame different pictures in your mind. It's kind of fun. I knew I was having this talk today, and I was in a school, and I ran into a bunch of young teenage girls, and I said, can you sit with me for a few minutes? I'm going to be speaking at a session today, and I would just love your perspective around that. And what was interesting, just to connect with what you just asked me, they said, Miss, we love that you're the boss and that, you know, you're a woman. You know, it really is. We like to watch that. We know that we can do that. When I tried to explain to them, because obviously I'm a little different, 40 decades plus older than them, that when I was their age, it was a very different world. And as a woman, you know, I think I was more cautious about taking risks or going for that next big job, because I felt like I had to have everything perfect, everything aligned before I did that. I didn't lean in, right? Maybe that book's old from Sheryl Sandberg, but I like it, right? I didn't think I could lean in until I was perfectly ready. Whereas I thought at the time, back then in the late 80s, men were more, you know, they would just take a risk and go for a job. Whereas I would
wait for a different day, right? That was
so what I heard from the young girls was that power of modeling. And I also was so inspired today, because I was telling them the story when I got my first administrative job. I was fairly young, 29. I'm not very tall. I'm only 5'2", and I was serving with an all-male team, and the shortest man was 6'3". Sorry, I'm still very American, and I can't convert that to centimeters quickly in my head. So I started to wear high heels then, so that I could feel like I was at least closer to the height of the men. And one of the young girls said to me, and I wrote it down because I didn't want to forget it. She said, well, Miss, you certainly learned quicker that you didn't need to wear those high heels anymore because you were taller in another way. And I thought, wow. So I think a long-winded way to go back, but I feel like models are essential, and how young people view them and think of them is very differently than maybe generations previously. So it gave me a little bit of goosebumps when she said that.
You gave me some goosebumps now, actually. It's unbelievable how we sometimes undermine the way we are perceived by others, and especially by younger children or younger females even. And Tammy, you know, there are major, like, obviously gaps in education, but in fact, when it comes to higher ed, there is a positive story to be told. We know that there are more women receiving education, but that doesn't unfortunately reflect into the workforce. And the same applies to the media field. Obviously, they mentioned the statistic earlier of it being at 24% for women. So what can we do in the early ed years, if you will, to positively impact this unfortunate reality?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is always about not just girls, but of course we're focusing on that, but just that everyone is allowed to follow their passions, that we push them, we support them to realize anything's possible if you put your mind to it. I think, you know, when you show a belief in young people, they will then begin to believe in themselves, and that self-esteem will certainly drive them to the future. I mean, I think another thing I noticed in the school I was with today, and one of the young girls that I was speaking with commented on, this particular school always has co-presidents, one female, one male, so that it isn't always seen the president is, you know, potentially a male, but that's joint, equal partnership in the work. So I think there's a lot of ways we can rethink traditional things that are done in schools or in the workplace to make that happen. And I love something Kinda and Annie said. It's hard to follow cool people from TikTok when you're like a school educator, but you know, it really is this power of community. They said the talk power of community, but I think it really is about the power of community in schools, that consistently parents, students, teachers see that we all work together in equal ways to support one another, and this kind of notion that we all stand on the shoulders of one another. And, you know, I love this little saying I used to have in my former office, which be the woman that straightens the other woman's crown, right? So
Yeah,
I think women supporting women is critical.
Absolutely. And to build on that, clearly the younger generations are now a lot more aware of, you know, gender issues, and this has evolved over time with the help of social media outlets such as TikTok and others. How would you compare it to the US? Would you say there are similarities? Would you say it's the same everywhere? Or do you feel there are slight differences here given the difference in the culture and the norms and so on?
You know, I came, before I came to Dubai, I was in California for the last 12 years. And I would say in that state, which I knew well from living there, they'd really been tackling many gender inequality issues for, you know, decades before maybe other countries were beginning to think about it. So I think there's definitely pockets where communities and states, you know, have tackled this and worked through some of the early issues and have gotten to a different place and acceptance and understanding. But I'm always inspired that the conversation is just continuing and keep pushing it. And I believe in this young generation, like these young women I was talking to today. There's no way the world's not going to be in a better place than when I was their age, you know, based on their incredible agility, persistence, grit, and really open-mindedness. The other thing I think is different about growing up in the international world than maybe in Southern California when I originally had, you know, my son was there for his first 14 years of life. Here, just being immersed with hundreds of nationalities and just really loving and appreciating the differences as opposed to saying that's not how we did it or I do it, you know, just really creates a more open-minded perspective on life. And with that, I think we'll be able to tackle any challenges really.
I love the optimism. I also always have a very positive outlook, hoping for the best. But then again, you know, there is a major misrepresentation, unfortunately, of women and girls in media, and this has a profound effect on young girls, no doubt. How do you advise parents and teachers to help soften or rather manage this exposure?
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes parents underestimate the importance of being engaged in what they're watching and setting some boundaries around it, depending on their age, right? And I think we can't forget that. I think that's a really important piece. I think it's just always about dialogue. We can never stop everything that they see or hear or are told from a friend, but having just open communication, you know, I love the dinner table for this, or when they're stuck in the car with you, when they really can't get out, that you can begin to open up some of these conversations. But I think parents and teachers nowadays really greatly help us impact these challenges because going back, it really is a whole community. It takes a whole village. I know in GEMS education, we have great support from our parent body. And there's a lot of representation of women in our schools, which I really goes back to that question on modeling, makes a huge difference.
Absolutely, I bet. But then again, you know, with social media, what then is your policy on social media in the school? Do you hold internal conversations on the negative effects it may have? How do you manage that internally as well?
Yeah, I mean, through like advisory classes, homerooms, civics, moral education, which is, you know, mandated subject here in the UAE. These are all places where we try to have conversations around young people. Also, schools set boundaries, right? Like it's not necessary to have your phone out 24/7 at school. You know, it's not the tool you use to do your assignment. So, I mean, we help by setting some boundaries. And then of course, because child safeguarding is essential, as in loco parentis, when students are under our watch, you know, all of our internet and infrastructure really shields them from anything inappropriate once they get inside the envelope of school.
Fantastic. It's always good to have some level of boundaries when it comes to social media. And I'd like to end this fantastic talk, and I think we could go on forever, but I'm very conscious of the time. With learnings, we have obviously so much to learn from the younger generation. So what would you say were your biggest learnings from them, from the young girls in your schools?
Gosh, there's something, you know, well, obviously that's why I'm in this business. I love young people, right? So I love everything about it. I think one young lady said today, and I'm going to paraphrase because I'm not going to say it as eloquently as she did. She said, you know, as young females, miss, we may see men or other people that may look stronger, but we need to remind ourselves that our minds are as strong. That was one thing she said. And that was not the same young lady that said the piece about the shoes. And I think they're growing up in a way that they say we don't feel different than the boys in our schools. Like, we know we're capable, and we'll go for whatever we want. You know, they don't hold themselves back, and I love that self-confidence, and as well as having empathy, right, and always being good human beings. So they just feel that they are aware of stereotypes, but they're not going to let that stop them from exceeding any goal they set before themselves.
And I bet that nowadays, like, we need to spread awareness about the new models of female leadership, even in the schools, even at such young, early ages, for these girls, to not try to hide, you know, their empathy or their rather feminine skills or characteristics, but rather use them and nurture them and leverage them to become better leaders for tomorrow. Thank you so much, Tammy, for your time. And this was a pleasure really to host. And thank you, Joe, Cass, and Rachel, for the opportunity to chat with Tammy. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I'm back on. Am I back on? There we go. You always need the camera to come on to make sure that you're there and everyone can hear you. Thank you, Saman. Thank you, Tammy. What a wonderful session. You're both very eloquent, and it was really enjoyable listening to both of you, and some wonderful insights. Obviously something that's very, very important, how we look after the next generation and the change they can make. Conscious of time, so we're going to move on relatively quickly to our next and final session. We've had two incredible sessions. This is set to be a juicy one. We've brought together experienced experts in their respective communications field. We wanted to give like a good perspective from journalists, from an academic perspective too. So next up, we have a very honest and engaging conversation on achieving equal representation in the media. Very, very critical conversation we need to keep having when it comes to empowering women in the field. I'm going to hand over to a trusted partner and a mentor of the Marbouta program, Rachel Dunn, who is the chair of Global Women in PR for the MENA region. She also is a brilliant multitasker and sits as a full-time job as the communications director for Microsoft for the Middle East and Africa.
Thank you,
and
Cass. Oh God, sorry.
I'll hand over to you to introduce the rest of the wonderful panelists.
No problem, I will do. Thank you, Cass, and apologies, I had a few technical issues before, so I don't know whether it was my laptop rejecting Zoom instead of Teams, but you know, hopefully with the connection will be fine. And yeah, proud Marbouta mentor and part of the program. So I'm really pleased to be here today. It's going to be a really interesting discussion, and I'm really honoured to be part of it. I'm very proud to introduce our panellists today. Caroline Faraj, who I'm sure many of you know from CNN, who's the Vice President and Editor-in-Chief for Arabic Services. So hi, Caroline. Thank you for joining us. We've also got Sharuk Zakaria. Hi, Caroline. We've also got Sharuk Zakaria, who is a multimedia producer and journalist at Khalij Times newspaper, and also Harris Breslow, Associate Professor, Department of Mass Communication at American University of Sharjah. So welcome to all three of you, and thank you so much for being part of today's event. Thank you. So if you're happy to just dive in, I think we've got quite a bit to cover. I think, some interesting points that have been raised from the first two sessions, some of the sort of takeaways, like that idea of the media kind of accelerating culture, but also representing culture, that kind of chicken and egg scenario. And also Tammy and Sama talked about this idea of kind of needing to have role models. I think, for this part, I kind of want to drill into, there is this general feeling that, I guess, representation of women in media, advertising, communications is behind where it should be. And I guess I'd like to kind of open by asking each of you, what do you believe are the fundamental causes of this discrimination? I don't know whether any of you'd like, maybe Caroline, you'd like to answer that one first.
Sure, because I'm actually bringing a really bright story, because due to the fact that because of this panel, I really went to HR and I wanted to get some more information and stats. And I'm happy to share with you that 46%, we have 45% who are directors, female directors within CNN, and we have 46% of them are senior people who are directly reporting to the president. So that basically shows that CNN is aware of this fact that they need to give chances. But at the same time, you have to admit as well that women are not taking it because of the quota. It's because of they're qualified. So they are qualified and they're leading. And I'm happy to say that, look at Christiana Mampour, for example, look at Clarissa, that you see. But behind the camera, behind the set, you will see that digital services within CNN on all platforms, international, Arabic, Spanish, it's all run by women. You can also see that news gathering at CNN is also run by women. So that we have really prominent positions given to women simply because they are qualified to take that. And also the CNN opened the door to accept and to give the credit to the women who are qualified to take that job. So I believe that, when it comes to CNN, it's a bright story. But of course, I'm currently in Jordan attending a conference, and I can tell you that it's really hard to see, for example, in the Arab world, a woman who is really qualified. Sometimes we have to admit, sometimes they give the position because of the photo op, not because they're really giving them a chance or giving them authority. Because it's not only for the screen; it's also for taking decisions and also running the show and give them space. So I believe, I can feel proud that I'm part of CNN who is giving this chance and admitting that this is a right and the right is given.
Caroline, yeah, great point there. As you say, also there's this idea of sort of, you don't want it to be tokenist, you don't want it to just be for a photo op. You need to obviously have the right people need to have the right experience. Academic point of view, with sort of this idea of the representation of women in media and in advertising, what would you say some of those causes of discrimination? Do you believe that there is still discrimination, and how do you kind of tackle that when you're talking to your students and kind of teaching the next generation?
I'm sorry, you broke up. Were you asking me? Yeah. So first of all, we have to.
Apologies. Yeah. Did you not hear? Did you not hear?
Yeah, you're breaking. You're coming in and out. So I heard the question, but I didn't hear who it was addressed to. But at the very end, I heard your teaching. So that's me. I think first thing that we have to do, and we talk about this with our students, I mean, you have to understand that these types of questions are addressed throughout the program and in different courses, not all courses. Some courses just don't really have the room for addressing these types of courses. But when we do address these courses, we don't look at singular institutions. We tend to talk to our students about the industry as a whole. And we talk about the factors that lead to the misrepresentation of females in the industry, or the underrepresentation of females in the industry. Some of it has to do with stereotypes. Some of it has to do with cultural attributes. Some of it has to do with the fact that even today, many organizations in the communication industry are worried about entry-level females at some point taking time off for family. And so you invest a lot, so you have this sort of old-fashioned attitude. We invest a lot of money in you, and then you leave to have babies and never come back, and we're stuck reinvesting. And so how do you get over that? I mean, and then you have women trying to get back into the industry, having had children, or working in the industry while having children. But there is this sort of old-fashioned attitude that, well, you have to be careful because at some point they're going to leave us because they're going to get married, and then their duty is going to be to the family, and that's just not right. So we talk about these structural factors. We also talk about talent, and we try to emphasize, and in my classes, and I teach, and 95% of my students are female, and so in our classes, the professional classes, the classes that are going to lead to CNN or lead to MEMAC Ogilvy or lead to anywhere else, we try to emphasize, first of all, being rigorous with learning. Secondly, in my classes in particular, I treat all my students the same. So I demand as much of my female students as my male students, and I don't treat them differently. Because in the end, they're not going to go into the workforce and be treated gently. That doesn't mean that I beat up on them, but it does mean that I have a standard, I hold that standard, and I don't allow for excuses for not reaching that standard. Thirdly, we attempt to, we continually iterate our program. So we continually iterate what we're teaching our students. We don't sit back and teach the same skills and the same courses over and over and over for 20 years. So for example, I teach a campaigns course. I started teaching that course in 2007. It's 14 years later. And there isn't a single thing the students are doing now that they were doing in that course even 5 years ago. Forget about 14 years ago. So we're constantly watching the industry and trying to prepare our students. And then the last thing that I want to say is I try to impress upon and then reinforce constantly to my students professional work habits. So Caroline and Sharuk didn't get to where they are because they show up 20 minutes late every day. And they didn't get to where they are because they turned in their work a day late. And so I just tell them, you're either on time or don't come to class. You either hand in the assignment on time or it's late. And if it's late, it gets a 0. And then they say, what's late? And I say, late is 1 second after the due date. Just that's the time of the due date. That's just the way it is. So you instill professional ethics and attitudes in them. You enforce those. You keep them up to date with the work, with the skills they need. And our integrated marketing communication program just received its accreditation review, and we're considered one of the top 3 or 4 in the world. And our journalism program is also extremely well thought of. So you keep students up to date with skills. And lastly, you don't treat the female students differently than the male students. You don't coddle them. You don't, I mean, I'm not trying to say that like, I don't bring a whip to class and beat them to death, but at the same time, I don't allow excuses, right? And sometimes students get emotional or they get upset, and I let them have, they come and talk to me, I let them have their moment, and then I said, okay, get past it. Because in the real world, so we constantly just try to, I think all of us in our program try to emphasize that what you're learning now and the way you behave now is what you're going to do and the way you're going to behave for the rest of your life. So this is what we tell them constantly. Yeah,
thank you, Harrison. Some great points there, including how you iterate the curriculum and how you're kind of constantly refreshing it, which I think is, is so important. Sharuk, what's your take? I mean, in terms of that kind of representation of women, and some of those causes of discrimination, what would be your take?
Well, honestly, we have come a long way, definitely. Maybe not as fast as we hoped for. The question of causes is quite complex because we're talking about cultural stereotypes that have been for centuries, right? So if we are to overcome them, it naturally takes so much work, so much effort, and most of all, an effort to change, most importantly. So an initiative to change things, which we don't see, unfortunately, much in the media field. For example, I will mention a very, very small situation. Dr. Harris right here was actually the first professor I spoke to when I wanted to choose journalism as my major. So my question was, does journalism have a future? And he was like, journalism is such a growing field. So in 5-6 years time, it will be so vast that you will do a lot of things. The reason why I mentioned this is because maybe if it hadn't been for a man encouraging me to go into that field, a professor, let's say, maybe I wouldn't have been right here sitting with you. So it's basically that effort, that initiative, not just to sit and wait for change to happen, but changing it yourself, even in the little things. For example, and I feel like the change as well needs to be as firm as the stereotypes are. So for example, we have seen the UAE has announced new labor laws that stated very, very bluntly that no discrimination is allowed when hiring women. And it stated also explicitly that there has to be equal pay. So maybe what I feel is, as our role as individuals, we need to take these little small steps to create the change. We need to have the initiative to create the change. But also on the other hand, there has to be really firm rules so that we can see the real bigger change on the bigger scale. Also have, like, again, we have in mind that this is something, a stereotype that we are dealing with for a while. Like Dr. Harris earlier mentioned, that women were given the roles of basically homemakers only, or they are viewed as someone that workplaces would be hesitant to take because of their social roles as mothers, as wives, as homemakers. So change, again, needs to be with an initiative, definitely. We have come a long way, but still there needs to be a lot more effort to be taken.
Some great points there, Shuka, especially things like, the importance of regulations and laws to kind of then support that, and things like the UAE, equal pay. I think, we talked.
Rachel,
Sorry,
can I just interrupt here? I think Shuru just mentioned a very important point about rules and regulations and all these changes. But we also need to emphasize the fact that many people lose their rights because they're not really fully aware of their rights by law. They don't read the Constitution. They don't read the laws. They go and say, they're not giving me my rights. And okay, which one? So I really encourage from this platform, I really encourage that, maybe everybody, not only maybe, everybody should know their rights through going back to the law, and also check exactly the tiny bit. Sometimes maybe it's a word, maybe it's a line that gives the person's right, and they can use it to defend their case. But maybe for women sometimes it's even more, because some people sometimes they claim, as that we cannot give it to women because it's not right. Based on what? Show me anything in the Constitution, in the rights, in the law, in anything that says this is not right. So I really encourage women to read fully what's going on, what exactly the rights are, and fight for it, and ask first, and then use it as a way of proving that this is my right. I'm not asking for a favor, I'm asking for my right.
That's a really great point, Caroline. Really, really good point. I want to talk about, earlier we heard this kind of point during the TikTok discussion about this chicken and egg, and kind of, media really, we know that holds an interesting position in that it's kind of both an influencer of culture, but also a reflection of culture. And I guess I'd like to ask all three of you, do you believe that the way gender is portrayed in the media is just simply reflecting society, or is the media somehow responsible for driving the opinions of women in the language we use to represent them?
So I would say that, first thing you have to realize is that people in the media are also members of the audience. So it's not like the people who work in the media came from Mars and are now programming the people on Earth about what to think. They are themselves and were themselves before they became media workers, editors, scriptwriters, producers, directors, whatever. They were themselves members of a culture. And so when they come to tell their stories, the stories that they want to tell, those stories tend to reflect the culture within which they come from, and the particular cultural, let's say, interests or biases, or things of social interest at that moment in time. So it's not, for example, you know, I was just thinking about the other day, there's an awful lot of TV shows and movies these days about like invasions, invasions from aliens, invasions from creatures, lost worlds showing up. And I thought about how that reflects the fact that right now in so many cultures, there's this massive concern over identity. And because of that, and identity is somehow feeling threatened, particularly in the United States. And so it's no surprise to me that we have all this sort of like entertainment content occurring, because it's a direct reflection of the social concerns of the moment. And quite frankly, the people who are creating the media are also people who are involved in those societies. So they are themselves representative of those concerns. So it's kind of not really chicken and egg. It doesn't really, because chicken and egg is ascribing agency to one or the other. And really, everybody in this panel right now comes from a culture and reflects those values, including the people from CNN who produce the news and say, what's important? What do we want to know right now? And that question will be answered in part by what drives the individuals culturally and socially. And when Shahrukh picks a story to write about, part of the reason she does so is because there are things driving her to be interested in certain things and maybe not others. And we have to recognize that.
Yeah, that's a great point. You know, this idea of kind of reflecting culture and you know, probably in people's individual biases and the sort of zeitgeist also. Shahrukh, what would be your take on that? I mean, in terms of kind of this, you know, representation of women, representation of gender and how gender is portrayed in the media?
Well, yeah, definitely individual bias does help, or honestly, it does contribute to why we choose certain stories and not others. Also why as well, I have seen it myself, how women also choose some stories that do not really contribute to representing women the way that they should be presented. And I think again, because these things we have internalized them so much that they have become the norm, right? Again, a very small story. We were interviewing Kate Blanchett on the red carpet, and we know how much of a feminist she is. And the female interviewer next to me, she's like, oh, so what are you wearing today? What kind of brand are you wearing? And Kate Blanchett just flips out. She flips her face and she goes like, I'm wearing a glittery dress, and she just leaves, right? Again, why the female interviewer asks such a question is because she thought it's normal. This is what people want to read. This is what the media portrays women as. Only the glittery stuff, the brands, the makeup, the fashion, everything. Again, it goes back to awareness that she internalized it so much that it has become the norm that women are represented that way. And this is what it's expected from us as women journalists, to represent other women the same way. But it goes back to education, it goes back to awareness, it goes back to making the first step, taking the first step to actually say, no, this is not how it's supposed to go. Answering your question about media, whether it's a reflection of society or vehicles of change, I think they work both ways. Media does reflect what the society is, but at the same time, they do endorse the ideas and opinions that we portray in media. So for example, as a journalist, if I portray a story, it's basically I'm part of the vehicle that's endorsing certain ideas and opinions in people. Had social media or media not been influential, trust me, leaders wouldn't have been now working on effective digital diplomatic tools so that they can sway public opinion, right? So media does play a very, very important role in endorsing opinions and swaying public opinion in a sense. So it really works both ways. Media does reflect society, but also media also helps endorse certain opinions and certain traditional beliefs that we want to endorse, or that certain people want to endorse.
Caroline, what would be your sort of build or take on that?
Well, I'll start by saying that it takes two to tango. So if sometimes the woman herself in the media would accept things that she shouldn't be accepting. And sometimes it depends on the ownership of the media outlets. So they can put the rules, and if they're aiming to use the image of the woman to bring more revenues, that's a different story. And if she agrees, then it takes two to tango. But at the same time as well, you know, we have to admit that things are changing now. You know, we used to see on screen and let me zoom in more on the Arab world. We used to see on the screen always like a woman who, excuse me, ladies, they have to be blonde with lots of makeup, and they look at the face, and sometimes you can see that these people are not really the one who are speaking. It's basically the producer who's talking to their ears. So they were faces because they want to promote this, because they're targeting audience that they're very much into women, and they look at and she is accepting it. So she wasn't forced to go and do these things. But nowadays we see that the level of beauty is in the content, and the level of beauty is in the offering and the production, more than the face and all that stuff. So these are changing, and we have to appreciate that these are changes that we're witnessing. But it's still, it's a long way to go in this part of the world. And the more we understand, and I go back to what I just said, the more I know my rights and I know what exactly gives me, the stronger I am, and I can basically put my conditions and appear in the right way. And this is something that needs women and men to support each other. We cannot say that only women can do that. If I don't have a man next to me who is also supporting. So it has to be a concept and understanding and respect within the society and within the community that we're working in. And it takes time. And it also, as I said, it also goes back to the mission statement of the network that the women are working for, and whether they're working for the truth or working for the money.
Yeah, it's a really good point.
And I just want to speak to what Caroline said. You see increasingly, I think this comes back to the role of education and the role of the enterprise that the students will end up in. The more students embrace professionalism and professional skills, young women, the more they're able to compete. The more they're able to compete, the more they will rise. And eventually, those skills and that attitude, right, embedded in them from the time they start school until the time they work, and then carried on through their work, means that we'll see increasingly atypical faces on television. So for example, in the United States on PBS, the national political correspondent is a woman named Yamiche Alcindor. And I don't know if you know who she is. Caroline, you're smiling, so maybe you know who this lady is. She's anything but a typical blonde hair, blue-eyed, beautiful woman. She's incredibly intelligent, and she's very well mannered and very well spoken, and her reporting is beyond excellent. But she's anything but a so-called typical face. And I think when Caroline was speaking and Sharuk was speaking, I was thinking, yeah, over time, we're going to see, even in this part of the world, more and more atypical faces show up. And the more those faces show up, the more it will become about excellence and skills and professional behavior and commitment to one's craft than it will be, does she have the look? Does she have the right appearance? Is she blonde? Is she pleasing to the male gaze? Right, that will disappear because, and in that respect, the media, regardless of the stories that the media broadcast, the media will lead the culture, because the media will be the ones who put those atypical faces in front of the population. And so eventually those atypical faces will not just be reporters, but they'll be political leaders, they'll be business leaders, increasingly you'll see them in politics and in business, and right, you won't have to be a beautiful, smart woman to be successful. You can just be successful without all the other qualifiers. That's, I think, in the end, what we're all looking for.
Yeah, it's an interesting point there. I think, maybe think when both of you were talking about, when you say what we're looking for, do we have this shared common goal? Because I think, it's like you were saying, Caroline, we need men and women, we all need to be kind of supporting each other. It made me think of things like allyship and this idea of respect. But do you believe that we have this common goal when it comes to kind of representation of gender within the media? Do we think we have a shared common goal, or do we want different things? And that's where perhaps the sort of discord is. I don't know, Sharuk, what your take is on that.
That's a really good question. going back to what Caroline was saying about rights and how women should be aware of the rights, I think this is exactly our role as women in media, right? To raise awareness on what the rights women have in the workplace, for example. So with the new law, now I made it a point to actually write an article on what clauses empower women and what rights women have. And this is where it starts, that we do need a shared common goal, which is, first of all, as women in the media, we do need a shared common goal to raise awareness, first of all, of the rights women do have to certain things, to stop certain stereotypes. So for example, if I have a story right there and an editor has a vision for it, it's my role as a woman to say, no, the story should be tackled in that way. So for me, honestly, the vision should be to limit certain traditional beliefs and be the start of a change. Say no to certain things, ride against the tide, like they say. So not say, okay, for any story that comes my way, no, we need to think of, no, I will tackle it 1, 2, 3. And sometimes the beginning is difficult. The beginning of change is difficult. It does bring backlash, but then you kind of the way through it slowly, and then change is made. I remember that, again, I always like to use examples. We were shooting a film, and there was a scene in the film where the woman had to pour tea for the man, for her husband, basically. So I was like, why does she have to do that? Like, can't he pour the tea himself? And then the director was like, yeah, but you know, it's a woman's responsibility to feed her husband. It's her job. I'm like, no, it's not her job. And like a really like an entire conversation. And then they ended up changing the scene. So the scene was that he wanted to pour tea for himself, and then she offered. And that's where he said, thank you. So basically she did it because she wants to do it. She offered to do it, not because she has to, and it's her job. You see what I mean? So like an entire scene was changed based on a comment made by someone, a woman who thought that this is not appropriate. So I think that's where it should begin. Just ride against the tide, say no to certain things, and then slowly change comes in. And
that's great point, great story, Sharon.
Most importantly, speak up as well. Most importantly, I always say speak up. So if there's something wrong, always speak up. If you see a woman in the workplace who's facing harassment, facing any sort of violation, speak up. Also speak up on your own rights as well. So that's the main thing.
Yeah, great point. Just conscious of time, Caroline, any kind of final thoughts in terms of sort of takeaways or and things that you think, you know, we should be thinking about?
I fully agree with the respected speakers that, you know, we need to take an action and we need to speak up and know our rights. But at the same time, I think also it's very important that we also start as people in the media, and we have our positions within our entities, and it appears that our entities are respecting that so far. So we need to take an action and take a mission statement. And I'm glad to share here as well that in January, we're celebrating for CNN Arabic and also CNN in the region being here for 20 years. And our mission statement, you're the first to know, for the whole celebration is going to be to empower Arab young women. So we're taking the responsibility that we feel that, you know, the women, they need to be empowered, especially young Arab women, and we would like to offer the support and help. And that's going to be our mission statement for the whole 22, you know, the whole year next year, inshallah. 2022 will be our mission statement to empower young Arab women. So we took that responsibility. I'm sure that if every entity is celebrating by empowering the women in their own way, I'm sure that we will start witnessing a change. It started already, and as I said, I'm optimistic, but we can see it faster a bit.
Yeah, great point. And I love that. I love that statement, that mission statement, Caroline. It's really great. Harris, any final thoughts from you? Just kind of conscious of time. Or any thoughts you'd like to leave us with?
Just that, you know, I've always believed that professors should be change agents. And the media can function as a change agent as well. Over the years, I've had the opportunity to go back to the West, offers from other schools. And the reason I stay at AUS is because I have this chance to empower young women. I was just telling this to my students the other day because one of them said, why are you here? And I said, well, you know, I believe that I'm an agent for change. And here I am in this very paternalistic, authoritarian environment, giving, you know, helping young women learn amazingly valuable skills and giving them the opportunity to work in a professional environment and be self-empowered and have the resources to be self-empowered so that they don't have to serve the tea. And my girlfriend, if I told her to serve me tea, would just laugh and say, get it yourself. And I mean, I think that for me is the most rewarding thing, right? Is to watch these young women like Sharuk, like they start their career and then in 15 years, they'll be, you know, inshallah, they'll be in Caroline's position. And there'll be other young women shooting for Sharuk's position. And that's exactly what I think we do. And I'm very proud to be part of a department that works very closely with people in the industry so that we create that path for young women, because 95% of our students are young women. I'm very proud of that.
I'm aware of that, so thank you, Professor, from my side. And on behalf of the thousands and thousands of young women you keep on teaching, really, you do make a difference.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Great discussion. I mean, you know, I saw in the chat someone about saying we should get together again. I'd love to continue the conversation. So interesting and really inspiring, actually, some really positive, you know, signs and sort of insights from all of you. So thank you. I'd love to talk further, but I think, you know, just thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your insights. Really great discussion. And I will pass back to Cass and Joe to close us out.
Thank you, Rachel. Thanks, Caroline. Thanks, Shuruk. Thanks, Professor. That was great. And as you said, I think we could keep going on and on and on. Which is why exactly we have this series. We have the Saraha series that we've coined, or given that name to, so that we can keep having these honest discussions that push boundaries, that are frank, that are real, that are engaging, and that push us to all make that change. I think not much left. I'm conscious that we've run over time, so thank you to everyone that's made it through to the end. Thanks for sticking with us. It means a lot. A huge thanks goes to the Arab International Women's Forum again for their partnership during this event. A massive thank you as always to the PRCA and Global Women in PR for your ongoing support and for being you know, a partner of Marbouta since the beginning. Lastly, special thanks to She is Arab, Samar, GEMS Education, Tammy, CNN, Caroline, Professor Harris from American University of Sharjah, Annie and Kinda from TikTok, and of course Sharuk from Khaleej Times. Thank you for making the time and for being here. I know how crazy busy it is. We've got the lead up to National Day and then the festive period, so everyone is crunched for time, so it means a lot that you made that time. To all the attendees, thank you. We look forward to seeing you at the next Marbouta event, and please stay posted for signing up for being a mentor or a mentee. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.